If you're in need of some motivation to tackle the parts of your reselling business that you've been avoiding, then you're in the right place, because me too. I'm challenging myself to get my reselling room back under control before setting foot in the thrift store again. I know things are getting out of hand when I don't have any more room on my racks to hang up my new thrift finds, so I need to tackle stain treating. I need to tackle this death pile. And don't get me started on this giant pile of returns. I have got to get those handled and enter all of these receipts for my bookkeeping. So let's get to it. One thing I find challenging about February is that the thrift stores don't have a lot of spring and summer inventory available yet, but if you do find a winter item, you need to get it listed ASAP so that you hopefully can sell it and won't have to hang on to it until next fall winter season. So even though I typically photograph and list in the order that I purchase things in to avoid cherry picking, I have been prioritizing winter items and setting aside items that I know will have plenty of time to sell this spring and summer. I am pretty good about keeping up on my bookkeeping. Once a week, I sit down and enter all of my receipts from Thrifting. But every single day, I use a really simple Google Sheets spreadsheet that I created that tracks my revenue, platform fees, and any other expenses like store subscriptions, shipping supplies, or any other services that I might use for my business. There's so many different ways to handle your bookkeeping, so my best advice is to find something simple that works for you. So come tax time, you aren't wanting to pull your hair out. Now that I'm all caught up on my bookkeeping, the next thing that I have to tackle is my returns. Now, I think it's really important to have systems set up in your business, and a system doesn't mean anything fancy or overcomplicated. In fact, my system for returns is this little basket that you see. When I do get a return, I do immediately relist it and then cross-list it to both platforms, but I need to make sure that these get put back into my inventory system so that when they sell again, I don't have to search through all these returns. It can go back into my SKU box system. Now, if I had been doing these every single week, this wouldn't have become such an overwhelming task, but unfortunately, I have let these returns pile up for several months because I kept putting it on the back burner, but today is the day that we get all of this caught up. So all I'm doing is finding the correct item on both eBay and Poshmark and then updating the SKU number that it will now be placed in. And let me show you what that looks like. For this jumpsuit, I am pulling up my listing on Poshmark and I am just scrolling down first to the description where I'm going to update the SKU. I personally do put my SKU number in the description and in the SKU number that's located at the bottom of the listing under additional details. And the reason I actually also put the SKU number in the description is when something sells on eBay, it's actually faster for me to search out the SKU number, and you can search out things that are in a description rather than having to type a name of an item, especially if you have some items that are very similar to each other. So that's just what I personally do. And then of course I do update the SKU under additional details. That way when an item sells, that will pop up when it sells, so it's easy for me to pull and ship out. And there it is, my last item. I have now completed re-entering them into my inventory system. I have an empty basket and I am feeling pretty good about that. So now what I'm going to do is take all of these re-inventoried items and put them away in my inventory storage system. Now that I can cross returns off of my to-do list, it's time to move on to my next project, which is tackling this death pile. I need to do a bunch of photography. And in order to be ready for photography, I sort of have to get my room set up. I'm going to bring my standing desk over. I'm going to bring my supply cart over so I don't have to make a lot of steps. I'm going to grab my inventory bags, my scale, and get started. And I don't know about you, but I personally work better with a little bit of caffeine and some entertainment. So I'm going to pop in my earbuds and I am going to crack open a Coke Zero, and that should hopefully motivate me to get moving. And I think I've shared this previously, but what I use is just a listing spreadsheet. Again, it's a really simple spreadsheet that I made on Google Sheets where I type in a quick description of the item, the SKU number from the bag that I'm going to be using. I also put in the measurements. So I have things on there for length and pit to pit. On jeans, I'm going to put the waist, the rise, the inseam, but all of that is on my listing spreadsheet. And I'll also have an area on there to make notes if I find a flaw. I also like to include a style number on this listing spreadsheet if there is one. That way I can do research while I'm listing to find the exact style name or maybe find out more information about that particular piece. And I think the thing that helps me the most when I'm doing these sort of repetitive, boring tasks is actually listening to audiobooks. Or maybe you have a favorite podcast, or maybe you just like listening to music. I think finding something that can keep you entertained is really the key to getting all this done and not just avoiding it. I am always looking for great audiobook recommendations, so if you have any, please share them in the comments. I am getting to the end of day 1. Let's see, we've made some progress, right? There's some empty hangers, but I do still have, bags of inventory on the floor, so I've definitely got a little ways to go. Heading into day 2, it was pretty obvious that I needed to set up some more inventory boxes. With the amount of things that I was photographing, I needed to expand. So I grabbed my 8x8x30 boxes. I have some extras that I had down in my storage area. I just get these on Amazon. They're actually linked down in my description under Amazon must-haves. So I am just going to fold in these corners to make room for the inventory, and I'm going to label it with the next 10 sets of numbers that I'm going to be using. So this particular box was going to be SKUs 1061 to 1070. And as I've mentioned before, simple is the key to my system. I just use these gallon freezer bags that you can get at any grocery store. I don't like to use the slide bags. I do find that those break, so I prefer the ones that are just like the typical seal bags. And all I do is label with a Sharpie the new SKU number. And once I've completed putting the SKU numbers on all of my freezer bags, the last thing I do is take my gallon bag box and put the next SKU number that will be used, so I don't have to wonder when I have to create a new box. And now it's time to get to work. Let's put all of these items away that I have just photographed. One thing I have been doing is setting aside anything that needs to be steamed because it's too wrinkly. So here I'm showing you several items that I have just sort of set aside, and I will do these last when I'm done with all the stuff that doesn't need to be steamed or doesn't need any special treatment. And you can see here's some empty hangers at the end of day 2. We are making some progress. Day 3 is really where I kicked it into high gear. I really wanted to make a dent in all of these photos. I don't know why having so many photos to do always makes me feel anxious, but it does. And I'm always curious to hear from other people. What's the thing you like doing least? Is it photos? Is it listing? Share it in the comments. And here's where we ended up on the end of day 3. A lot of progress was made. I need to photograph shoes, and I've got to get some steaming done. So that brings us to day 4. One of the reasons I'm always hanging up everything that I bring back from the thrift store is that so I don't have to steam a lot of items, but sometimes there's no way to avoid it. Sometimes linen items and other kind of materials just get wrinkly no matter what you do. I also find that steaming is a great way to sort of sanitize anything that's maybe like silk or wool, something that you just can't throw in the washing machine. So I do love having my steamer. I personally use a Jiffy steamer just because it does hold a decent amount of water, so I don't have to keep like refilling it when I have a lot of steaming to do. I know some people use handheld steamers. Some people don't steam at all. It's just personal preference, but My husband got me this really cute one for Christmas one year. It's pink. I love it. And even though I avoid steaming and kind of procrastinate on it, there is something kind of relaxing and soothing about doing steaming as long as you aren't burning your fingers. All right, guys, we are now back for day 5 where we are going to tackle those shoes. I like to set up a little workstation where I can clean off any price tags or any other gunk that's on the shoes. I just use Goof Off to get off the, Sharpie that's on the bottom of shoes, and I just use a cotton ball. And if worse comes to worse and that doesn't work, I will just use a Sharpie and mark over the price and just note that in the photos and in the description. I really do not like cleaning shoes, so I am really particular about the ones that I pick up. I typically try to pick up ones that are in kind of ready to photograph condition, or maybe they just need to be thrown in the washing machine. But other than that, I do not like to put in much work when it comes to shoes. I know some people only resell shoes, but I could never do that. They kind of drive me crazy. So I'm done cleaning off all the prices. Then I'll use that same table to take the photographs, and I'm just gonna put the information into my listing spreadsheet for each pair of shoes. And then I also use Photo Room to just white out the backgrounds on all of my shoes. I just pay for the yearly subscription because Photo Room is also great for, taking out backgrounds, making photos square when they're not square. So I use it a lot. After 5 days of hard work, this is where I ended up. I'm feeling really good about the progress, and I'm going to reward myself with some thrifting.